In a world where everywhere we turn, we are faced with digital options and devices, I know that there is this craving, if you are like me, to bring more analog back into your life. And in which cases does it make sense to do so, right? Because certain things, when you consider the analog aspect, it is typically slower and more inefficient. If we think about, people writing lists on a cuneiform or clay tablet and carrying around, let's say, 10 of those, that would be very heavy. And so I'm sure at some point people were very excited when the scroll came out. And, there were some people who were very nostalgic about losing the clay tablets. But I would say that that gap has gotten even crazier now, right? Because we have devices that can do anything and everything. That can actually be a major problem, as Professor Cal Newport has pointed out, where, you want things that are single purpose tools. So something like a Kindle would allow you to just read books on it, right? So it is a piece of tech, but it's a piece of slow tech, right? There are things that it's keeping in mind that are not making you as prone to the distractions that you might get on an all-in-one device like your smartphone, which you can, of course, read your Kindle, but you can also get distracted by a million other things. And so there are, of course, options like that to bring more analog back into your life. But I want to focus on some really simple things that you can begin today without having to go out and buy a whole new device just for doing it, right? So let's start with one of my favorite ones, which is One Line a Day. The One Line a Day journal is a 5-year memory book. And so every day you basically write, 1 or 2 lines, and you write the year and the date, and basically on each page there are 5 entries. And so every year on that same date, you will basically see the previous year's entries. And so I think it's very cool because this one book is something that is going to last you 4 or 5 years. And it's something that gives you an opportunity to grab a physical pen that you enjoy, and you might feed the dose that you have of, I want to write with a physical pen again, right? You might get more out of it than you think by just writing this one line and doing it consistently. And so this is a great way to kind of feed that analog need to write pen to paper, and also do some built-in reflection that you get while you are doing this. I'll admit I don't fill this out every single day like I should. I actually do it a couple days at a time, but it's always a great reminder when I make that mistake, because you're like, oh, what exactly, you're trying to pinpoint what I did 5 days ago that stood out and that was maybe noteworthy. And so these are a great way that you can put pen to paper, turn a journaling practice into something that is very quick and simple. Takes less than, a couple minutes a day if you wanted to commit to it. So I'll link to the one that I have in the description below. But the second option that I wanted to share with you that I think is going to be even more accessible is getting something that is going to be your personal notebook. And so this is kind of like a journal, a diary, whatever you want to call it, right? The idea here is going to be that anything that is related to yourself, so not things that are like maybe things that you're working on, right, that you might want to type up in your notes app or in Notion or have somewhere else. This is more so for a space for reflecting on what you're doing, thinking about what you're going to do, asking yourself questions, right? And really using it as a place to explore your own thinking and get a better understanding of it. And so for me, I have this notebook by Paperage, I think it's called, and it lays flat. It's so nice. It's got, I love this color. It's got this little closing thingy here. And as you can see on my shelf over here, I have a whole row of basically these types of notebooks and other ones that I've used over the years. But I have been maintaining journals since I was probably 17. Sure, I may have had days or weeks where it was, I was off, but there really hasn't been a time where there have been months where I've been away from capturing things that have been happening. And the reason this practice I find is so important is because now when I go and pull off any random notebook from like 2 years ago, 5 years ago even, I have direct access to what I was thinking, what I was worried about. And oftentimes just seeing that can give you such a sense of like, whoa, wow, I have come a long way. I have come further than I thought. It kind of brings you back to the contrast of what things were like to what things are like now. And so I always find anytime I flip open to an older entry, there's always something that I'm going to learn. And even if you don't do it that often, just having the option to do that when you want to is really satisfying to me. Think about kind of going through your whole life and filling out a whole row of a bookshelf of, your experiences and your view of the world and, you being a part of history. I think that's kind of an exciting project, even if nobody sees anything from it, because a lot of the stuff that goes in here, nobody, it's like scribbles and things that are just, me being, thinking about things that I would never maybe put out there. But that's the reason that I think you'll enjoy this method, is because paper is one of the safest technologies, oddly, right? It's something that cannot be hacked through anything, and nothing can be leaked. It's like you can have this in here and you could tear it up if you wanted to, and there's just a sense of, oh, this is mine and there's no distractions happening here, right? And I have something like the Remarkable, right, where I use that as well. But nothing, I find, even after 2 years of using Remarkables, nothing replaces having a physical notebook. I still, even when I use a Remarkable and I get that itch to go a little more analog, I come back and try to write down a few lines into my journal. And so it can be a great notebook that kind of reinforces an identity for you. And so if you think about Alex Honnold, the guy who free soloed, he basically has like a notebook where he's writing his moves down, right? Like he's imagining the moves that he's going to take. He's using that log to really document what happened that day, why something went wrong and what didn't. And so in every craft, there is a form of this notebook. And so if you don't like the idea of it just being maybe a journal, you can turn it into kind of this skill development notebook, right? I work on my skill. I train a specific part of my skill when I open up this notebook. And so that can be a great motivation for bringing some more analog into your life. Now, the third method, which I really enjoy, is using a combination of sticky notes and index cards. So I am somebody who has basically been using Ryan Holiday and Robert Greene's note card method. I probably have it here somewhere, but it's like I at this point it's probably like 600-700 note cards that is for my next book. And so I only use it for book writing, but I think that I am going to use it for many other things, and you can use it in whatever way you want here. But I find it very, very fun because, first of all, index cards are relatively cheap, right? It's not like buying a really nice moleskin notebook that's going to be $30 or something. It's typically something you can get for a couple dollars. You could get 100, or I remember getting a pack of 1,000 for like less than $10. And so basically when you make mistakes and things like that and you just want to scribble, you don't feel this sense that sometimes I do with a nicer journal or notebook where you're like, oh, I don't want to fill out and ruin a whole page, right? You're being a little bit more, filtered with what you're putting on the page, versus if you have something like sticky notes and note cards that are relatively, cheap, you're able to kind of be more, capturing more raw thoughts. And so the sticky notes that I like are the really small ones that are like, I'll link them up, but they're like 1x1 or 2x2 inches or something like that. The reason I love using them is because I get to use a Sharpie. So think about the last time you've gotten to use a Sharpie, right? It's like, when do I do that? But there is kind of this satisfaction sometimes to using a marker or like using your favorite pen. I, of course, do that with these note cards too, but a lot of times I'll bring out my red Sharpie, which is I enjoy using. And, I fill out the front with whatever note I'm capturing, right? And I typically date it as well. I've always had it of dating and sometimes even timing it, but dating for the most part just because it's quicker. And then I can typically see, oh, when did I make this connection? When did I come up with this note? When did this, really important thought come in mind that I needed to turn into a note card? And of course, it can be scribbles that only you would understand, right? This is for you. It's not really for anybody else. But I think it's just a good practice because you can actually build up a lot of these and it doesn't take up insane amounts of space, even when you do have 1,000 different note cards. And the whole idea behind, Ryan Holiday and Robert Greene's research system for writing a book is that once you have like 1,000 or so, or you'll know when you have enough, you can just kind of, all the material is there and you just need to now connect it, right? And so you can I just love the tactile feeling of holding on to and feeling the texture of the cards and being able to kind of move it around on my desk and make those connections. So that is one of the best ways you can bring analog back into your life. Just the same way with the sticky notes, I'll write tasks and things on there that are like in places I will see, right? Versus a note or a app I might forget to open up, and boom, I've lost out on some of the things that are in there. Versus you can use sticky notes to get that itch of writing things out. And of course, reading too, right? So instead of just reading books, that's an obvious one that I could have given you for bringing analog back into your life. But I like the idea that you can kind of read your own thoughts. You can read your own, material by whether you are using the second method of, journaling, or whether you're using the third method of these note cards. You are basically going to have this raw data on what you care about, what you think about, what you want to work towards, and how often do we get that kind of time? And so I think analog has this great association with slowing down. And yes, you could type this thought up faster, but the act of writing it out, the act of putting it on this note card and it being hard to carry around and, something that you got to return to. Like I do find that I don't have all my 1,000 note cards when I'm traveling. So I'm like, oh, okay, I can't make those connections, but I'm excited to get back so I can start fiddling around with them, right? And so there are, of course, going to be disadvantages with some of these analog methods that will make you a little slower or inefficient, but oftentimes that is the point. You are doing it to slow down and to connect with something that the digital stuff is not giving you. So I hope this was useful, at least one of the methods. If you try it out, let me know. And of course, if you've tried out anything else that's been useful for you, drop a comment. I would love to hear from you. But thanks so much for hanging out. Make sure to like, subscribe, review, all that good stuff wherever you're at. And I will see you on the next one.